Welcome, everybody. Very excited to be here with Danielle Eddy, who I'll do a little formal introduction in just a moment. But for all our fellow PI nerds, you can see on the screen, Danielle, very communicative, really good at reading people, naturally coach, teach, connects quickly with folks. And fortunately for today's kind of style, pretty casual and kind of go with the flow with the informal style. So that's what this is going to be, is truly Q&A, just doing a little background and keeping it real. We were going to wear pajamas. That's the story for another webinar, but being casual is a helpful thing when we're just kind of rolling with it. So this is what's batter up in our short time together today. Almost did the introductions, almost there. And then we're going to really get into Danielle and her company, GCON, and get a little background, get us up to speed on what's been going on. So then we can pivot over to kind of the exciting parts of the work that they have been doing over this past year in terms of upskilling, career laddering, analyzing the skill gaps, et cetera. And then I think the important part too is, besides just learning about Danielle and GCON and what they've been doing, best practices, also a little bit on what she might have done differently, now kind of looking back on such a big project. And then, of course, as Hiro mentioned, opportunity for you guys to ask questions. So don't be shy, hit the chat, ask questions, and we want to make sure that everyone gets some value out of this. So thank you again, Danielle, for being willing to jump on this call. It's wonderful to have you. It's been great partnering with you all.
Likewise.
The screen loads a little bit, just a quick little background. I think we'll start out by you kind of explaining GCON, but on the screen you can see a little bit of background. And I have to just point out, not to make light of the awesome work that you guys have done, but there has to be some kind of competitive advantage with your CEO's last name. And Hiro is going to tell me not to say anything more, so I'm not, but God on speed dial, God in my back pocket. I mean, awesome last name here. God be here is part of the awesome history of your guys' build. But let's switch gears, Danielle. Can you give us a little, get us up to speed on GCON and especially the kind of what brought on the need for this project?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a very busy ride over here at GCON. But as you saw my PI, I love that. I love moving fast and working with people. And so that really is what brought me over to GCON, just very rapid growth. We grew 100% in 2021 to 22. And, with that fast growth, it really led to, okay, how are we going to sustain it? How are we going to scale at a rate that is actually going to benefit our organization and provide value to all of our stakeholders? So GCON is a commercial contractor. We also do high-tech construction. So very relevant to all of the work going on in the Valley right now and all the booming construction. And then we do also have sites in Oregon and New Mexico and California as well. So been able to kind of see the market in all areas. The need for talent development is across the board.
Yeah. And a little scale. So from where you were a few years ago in terms of population to where you're going, I think that'll kind of help people understand the need for the work that you've done too.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have a very aggressive 5-year growth plan to meet the demands of the market, but also what we know we're capable of as a company. And so we are looking to grow by another 150 employees in the next 4 years. It could very much be a greater number than that, but we're trying to go after sustainable growth as well. And so that's really what's led us on this path of looking ahead and having a competitive advantage by doing the strategic analysis, within the next 5 years and not just having a reactive approach to talent development.
Yeah, that's great. So just a huge amount of growth. So y'all were doing great for a number of years, and we can see when you were founded in 2003, and then not suddenly, but pretty quickly, you're going to double the size of the organization over a few years. So that brings in this moment of, okay, what should we be thinking about? And I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can actually not see my face, but be able to see yours a little bit as we get into the Q&A. So we know we're going to have to do upskilling. You've got the current state, you're bringing on all these folks. Walk us through a little bit, like, how did you prepare to get the executive team? And I laughed there a little bit. Executive team sometimes can be hard to get their attention, especially with big initiatives. Give us a little background and kind of walk through on how you got their attention, how you made sure that the upskilling project was kind of on their radar and one of their top priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the chuckle because I think we know what it's like to wrangle executive teams.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we have a very engaged executive team that wants to focus on our people, that wants to invest in our people. And so that first and foremost was already an advantage that we had at GCON to be able to bring a value prop on talent and development forward. So certainly lean into that if you have an organization that already has a people-centered business model. That's going to do you advantage when you build that business case. But really what we found when we were starting to dive into that value prop for talent and development, when we talked to all the different executives, they all had a different vision for what that would look like. So before we could even really put a case together that aligned with everybody's needs, we had to really understand what everybody's unique pain points were, and be able to, almost like a Venn diagram with the overlapping needs, create a case that was the solid foundation for it, but then also be able to address all the outlying needs that our executives had for talent development. And it was wild because I think, anyone who is an HR or learning and development professional, like, we know how important this is. We know how important training is. And I was a little naive. I kind of just assumed that everybody knew what this was. But we really had to create a case and define what upskilling is, define what this means. But then more importantly, tie it into what the executive strategic vision was. At the end of the day, that is how we got the buy-in needed, really by tailoring our case to what they wanted.
Yeah, that's really great. And for all of us, again, to your great point, if we've been in HR, whether it's talent acquisition, leadership, you always have that moment where you have this initiative and you're like, this is obviously huge. We're growing like crazy. We've got to upskill. We've got to figure out, we do the gap analysis. Like, in our minds, we're like, anyone who wakes up in the morning, puts their foot on the floor, knows this is critical. And then you get that point. So the executive team does go, oh my gosh, that's great. But great call and best practice on getting with each individual, because it's almost like hiring somebody. Each of those leaders has a different idea on what great looks like. So getting with them individually and clarifying, here's the project, here's what upskilling is. It's probably going to be taking your resources. Is this in line? Yeah. And then, can you give us a little bit more on that? I'm just kind of interested in those conversations a little when you're talking about GCON, construction, all the things that they're doing. And you've done very well at this, but a lot of HR folks coming in with the human capital angle into the revenue construction conversation. What was that like to get them up to speed on the value of upskilling?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like you alluded to, they know your executives know how valuable your people are. You really have to paint the picture in their terms. So, of course, it's one of those, maybe we all just inherently, of course our people are important, but how do we talk their language, their vernacular? So what we really did was take a lot of the market-based research of, how the impact that training and development has on an organization, the ROI impact, and then tie that into not only just the profitability and the bottom line of the company, but what are the strategic goals for our company? One thing that's widely important at GCON is that we produce a quality product. What is needed for that quality output is training. We need to be able to be on the cutting edge of all the different new techniques and practices to satisfy our clients and create that quality product. So it's not just tying it into the profitability model, but also what are your core values? What is your mission and vision for your company? And how do you tie that into your case as well? So that was really important because now we're speaking their language. They've already outlined this vision for their company. Now we're just speaking to the language that they've already outlined, and it clicks.
Yeah, beautiful. So you're underway. Everyone's aligned as much as we can get. Changing priority lines.
So it's a continuing process.
Yeah. Once we got them aligned, we were done. That was over.
Yeah, I wish.
So kind of walk us through how'd you do it? What are the practices and the steps that you took in order to kind of actually get going on this big project?
Yeah, great question. So really and this was also kind of a learning lesson for us too, is we really had to assess the tools in our toolbox because we underestimated how big of a lift this was going to be. And also to your point, this is not just done in a vacuum. This is not something that you launch this and, okay, you're done. You can set it free and never go back to it. What we realize is this is always going to be a continuous improvement effort. And so once we realized that, the scale of the whole project just took on a different form. It dramatically increased. We knew that we would have to work across the entire organization to do this effort. So that really had us going back to the drawing board to really understand, okay, what tools do we need for this type of lift? And you have to look at your processes, but also the tech that you have in place to get that done. Now that you're scaling larger and you're involving the entire organization, do you have the tools in place to manually track these or to track these things that you're not doing it manually? Do you have the people in place that are going to be able to, that are aligned with your vision, your mid-level managers, your incoming supervisors? Do they understand that mission? What's your communication strategy to get that out? And so you almost have to just create your outline. And again, this, I would say over the 5 years that aligns with your strategic vision, you really have to get big with it at first. If you try to piecemeal it and grab bits and pieces, it's not going to be sustainable, and people will not understand what you're trying to do because they're not going to see that big picture.
Yeah. And so when you're looking at, I'll take it back to 2022, and you're doing the 5-year view and going, okay, here's the workforce right now. Here's the skills that we need them to have, the traditional gap analysis. When you were doing that, did that require you to get new software or get new products, or to walk us through a little bit of the technical pieces that you needed in order to make sure this was successful?
Yes, absolutely. So for us, what was really critical was the getting a learning management system that was able to bring these career pathways and be able to automate all of that, automate the training involved with the career pathways. But also we were wanting to foster an environment where we really were giving the mid-level managers and supervisors the power to coach and develop their people. And really, we needed a tool to quickly disseminate all that information. So our learning management system was the key piece there that we needed. We also needed to pull in other processes, other tech stacks. We have our project management software, we have accounting software, so that had to integrate, and we had to have trainings around that as well. So we really did have to take a look at the tech that we were underutilizing and make sure that we're creating a path forward, and we're leveraging that because we have a momentous lift with this. We need to leverage tech in order to get it done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, and this is kind of off the track a little bit because we can handle this, but it's fine. But I'm wondering too, so you go out, you put a plan together, the executive team, and they're pretty savvy folks. I mean, I like to taunt the executive teams. They're wonderful. They get it. They get the buy-in. You get rolling. And then you mentioned kind of out of the gate, you guys had to go, hold on, this is actually getting pretty big, pretty scale. So what are some of the things that might have caught you a little off guard from the initial 5-year plan to once you got rolling? You mentioned the LMS, but what are some other things that our listeners can think about as they're thinking about gap analysis and upskilling at this level? What are some things we should be looking out for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once you have your strategic vision, your C-suite spot off on it, you're like, great, we're good to go. And then you realize, oh my gosh, your entire organization needs to be in the loop on what this learning management system is, what this upskilling effort is. Because again, in your mind, you're like, oh, we've already addressed this. People understand it. But again, it looks different to everyone else. Your mid-level manager is going to be concerned about how they're going to use this for coaching and developing their employees. Your entry-level employee is going to be concerned about, do I have the training and the skills training to actually grow my career here? Every user within the organization is going to have a very unique pain point. And that's where you need to start bringing in your committees and your teams to help disseminate information, disseminate trainings. And it becomes a much larger effort than just your learning and development team and your C-suite. Now you have to create these subcommittees out that will continuously, enhance the learning and development effort.
Yeah. Hence the reason that you did such a great job getting the buy-in. You can imagine 6 months later, all this is happening. there's communication going on. Someone goes, what are we doing? And they're like,
Yes.
you need that executive team to go, here's exactly what we're doing. And it's not a 3-week initiative. Like this has a life to it.
Yes.
When we talk to HR folks all the time, they're always like, oh my gosh, every year we do an employee survey. Every single year, communication is like one of the top 3. And they're like, like it's a celebration when communication goes from number 2 to 4 on the list. You're like, yay, we're getting better. So yeah, it's such a key point, like that constant communication to mid user at the front end. You have to stay so far ahead of it and over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Any best practices in terms of that with your subcommittees and the communications? Is there something you've learned now that you're going to keep using over the next few years in terms of how to get people up to speed and remind them? And how do you keep that communication channel rolling?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing we really took away from it was quick and succinct communication. So doing 15-minute check-ins with your committees weekly, just to make sure that you're on track, understanding what people's pain points are, and then having very direct swim lanes, I call them. So everybody knows what their role is and what they need to be following up on. And then you're able to really delegate a lot more tasks a lot more efficiently. And if you have your communication organization chart lined out where, this manager is going to talk to these people, this manager is going to talk to these people, then you've been able to rapidly disseminate information. And it creates that more personal touch too, because it's coming from people that are already interacting with their employees. So that's a key piece, is you want to make sure there is still a personal element to it, and they're tied into people's day-to-day. They need to know that, okay, if I'm going to give this communication to somebody, it's actually going to, I know what the impact is. And that's where, when you have those quick 15-minute meetings with key stakeholders, everyone's bought in, there's accountability both ways, and it makes the communication much easier.
Yeah, that's really good. As you're saying that, I'm just thinking of, we're always kind of weaving and kind of fighting sins of the past, et cetera. One of the things always is flavor of the month. And it sounds like you've actually figured out a way to keep it, telling people this is not flavor of the month. We're not going to do this for 3 months, get the frontline leader buy-in, all of a sudden change the communication, or we're going to change the strategy. This is in place for a while. How long will this be in place until you guys might go, okay, we've made some significant increases in our skill capability with the team? Is that something that you might see in 6 months, or what's the forecast in when you'll start feeling it and the workforce can kind of feel the upskilling?
That's a great point. And that kind of brings me to another key piece of holding yourself accountable is creating metrics for making sure that these things are valid. And that would actually be a big piece I would tie into your ROI and your value prop, is holding your learning development teams, your HR teams accountable for this big lift that's going on in the organization. So to your point, Jerry, definitely establishing metrics around employee engagement with the training, knowing, and when you know what you're going to measure. So for example, at GCON, if we know that we want to increase the scope of some of our services, we're going to look at what skills are needed that relate to that scope. And then what we'll tie that into is quality metrics. So it's definitely, you have to kind of look at what your end goal is and figure out, okay, what are we trying to measure? I think that's the biggest point. If you're measuring things that really, that you're not going to be able to report on, that aren't going to actually tie into your strategy or your bottom line, people are just going to look at the metric and be like, I don't really know what value this adds. So again, for us, and then to, I guess, go back to your question, really is we're always going to be doing that. And that's what we learned. It's not going to be this, oh, okay, we have these skills, let's let them be for a year or two and see where we're at. We have to continuously evaluate it. Now, that's typically from a strategic standpoint going to be an annual thing, but obviously if we're going to be looking at data and reports on a monthly basis for engagement, quality, etc. If we realize that we're falling short in areas, we can make quick pivots and changes to figure out, was the training ineffective? Was this really not a skill we should be measuring? So, I mean, in reality, we need to be measuring these things on a monthly basis to make sure that they're valid, that a year's not going by and we realize, oh my gosh, we were measuring the wrong thing, or that skill was completely irrelevant. So it's absolutely an ongoing thing.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, and I had a little glitch in my time, but I heard that last piece. Sorry to anybody if my face freezes weirdly. Let's face it, it's going to happen to somebody. It's going to happen to me this morning. Another key tenet. So thank you, Danielle, too. Like, right, if you're going to do it, you have to have some kind of measurement. It needs to be a measurement that people get. I love how you describe it. The person who's doing the upskilling. So I'm going to go do this training. I'm going to be asked to go out. Maybe it's certification, whatever it is. I need to know what this is for. It's for my career. It's building my capabilities, right? Which is wonderful for retention. But then that language still needs to be good enough for the executive team so that as an HR practitioner, they say, how's this initiative going? We don't go, yeah, it's going pretty good. People seem to like it. Like that the shelf life of that answer isn't very long. So you have to be able to go, here's our quality metrics. Here's exactly where we're at now. Here's where we're heading. Yeah.
Yes. And I just want to touch on something that you're alluding to that's so important, because I think the perception sometimes in C-suites amongst training is that it's very fluffy. It's, we're just gonna give this to make people happy and, pat on the head, they're getting training. And yeah, we want people to be incentivized to train on whatever they feel like. But at the end of the day, we're not just putting this training out there to check a box and say, oh, we met a goal of training. We're trying to upskill. We have to grow our organization. We have to scale. We need to make sure we're actually doing that, or else this investment is really for naught. So yeah, I think like you said, when you have strong metrics that are tight, that the C-suite understands, they're going to be much more bought in. They're not going to see training as just a fluff thing that they, can put on a website like, oh, we offer training opportunities. It's like, no, we're doing this. And look at how that training was able to grow our business. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you're going to share some of the resources, and Hero's going to send out some of the resources that you use. But when we spoke briefly about kind of the retention, it was your insight on what this gives GCON, kind of a different lens, if you will. But can you talk a little bit about what this looks like in terms of kind of attracting and retaining folks?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anyone could do a Google search right now and hear the term people-centered come up.
Totally.
And I think that's where we, the HR teams and learning development teams really we have this huge opportunity to have a seat at the table with our C-suite to engage in that strategy with people-centered. And people-centered really is making people your priority. It is a ethos that centers around your organization will be nowhere without your people behind it. And it's very true. Even when we do have tech that we're using and leveraging, there are people that need to analyze that tech. There are people that need to analyze the product of that tech. And that's why we need to upskill people to be able to do that in this ever-evolving economy we're in. So really, that's kind of the key there is we're people-centered. We want to keep our people happy, engaged, but we want to give them this feeling that they're not going to be abandoned by their company. And that's really what you saw shifting after the pandemic is people feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to have a job. We saw markets being wiped out. We saw jobs being eliminated, and it led to this a huge uncertainty amongst our workforce. And you see that now, and that's why it's so important when you're a company that can say, we are people-centered, we invest in you, we are going to give you a path forward. If the market changes and pivots, we got you because we are going to skill you and reskill you to be able to keep you employed. That'll alleviate so much, frustration or uncertainty on the employee's behalf. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to be more productive. They're going to be more bought in. And then that can be directly tied into your company's bottom line too. So there's just so many facets that you could go off when you talk people-centered. But really what it is, it's investing in your people and giving them, knowing that they will have security and they will enjoy coming to work every day, and it'll just pay off on your bottom line.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Danielle, this is why we hoped you'd join us for this webinar. That's so well said. I'm like, yeah. And I think you're totally right. Like, it's okay to be skeptical, and I agree that after the pandemic and everything, people are naturally skeptical. What a great kind of solve for skeptical people thinking about joining GCON or whatever organization. When you get inside, and everyone's gotten pretty good at saying, "Hey, we're all about people and culture." Like, really? You get
Right.
inside the organization and like, here's a career path.
Yeah,
Here's what the trajectory of your job could look like. We're actually
exactly.
using some instruments to know where you would naturally enjoy your job. So like you're
Yep.
proving it, right? It's different. You can
100%.
attract people, but when they get in there, they go, holy cow, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to tell my spouse or significant other 2 weeks on the job at GCON going, you're not going to believe this. Like their training curriculum, how they're thinking about the future. I may not stay in this actual role. There's other roles there and I can get trained for it. Yeah. Stuff that all of us
Yeah.
on this webinar know, but I love it. I mean, that's it. It's a great way to prove it. Like, are you really about
Exactly.
people and culture?
Yep.
Yep. Ta-da. Yeah.
And what I actually love about what happened after the pandemic is workers demanding these things. And
Yeah.
you saw the shift towards workers we're not going to settle for anything less. And I love that collective power. But you're so right. It's like they're not asking the questions of like, oh, okay, well, what kind of company holidays do you have? And what's in your break room fridge? They want to know, am I going to have a long tenure at this company? Because I want to work hard. And I want to know that you're going to invest in me as well. So they'll be able to sniff that out very fast.
Yeah.
And it's something that we can no longer hide behind. Yeah, like maybe a false image that we're people centered. We have to really walk the walk, so to speak.
Yeah. I do. I love that too. It's an equalizer in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think maybe it's kind of workforce and some of the different ages that are in the workforce. But I think as a whole, people are naturally a little more, I'm going to say wisely skeptical. Like,
yes,
yeah,
very much so.
prove
Very
it.
much so.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. If you talk to any employee right now, maybe even the quiet employee that doesn't speak up, ask how they feel about the future of the economy and their job. I guarantee they're going to say, I'm pretty uncertain. And that's why it's so important to always touch base at the ground level with employees, because they will tell you what they're thinking. It's pivotal that you're always connecting with them in that manner to be like, okay, well, what can we do to help you? Because it's amazing how many people I talk to. And like I say, quiet ones that you would never expect that, do their job and do it well. They're also feeling like, it's an uncertain time. And so really, we have to do our best to alleviate those fears.
Yeah. It seems like, and this is non-scientific, it does seem like the quiet folks, they're watching, they're listening, right? Those are the folks that they are smelling out the truth from not truth. I'll say it that way. So I'm not swearing on a webinar, but yeah, that's great. Right. And again, just being able to provide that.
Jerry, can I interject with the question from the chat? So when we're talking about like the skill gap analysis and the work you put into with the LMS and like getting content, we had a question come in and said, how did you align the learning content to the skills needed? Is that something that you partnered with the LMS, or did you have to make an investment in building your own curriculum or purchasing other content?
That's a great question. And it was both for us. We knew that we needed a huge content library to be able to align with all of the skills that we evaluated. So our LMS provider, that was part of the package that we went with, that they had a very robust content library. We also looked at the modalities of content too, because again, we had to understand how people wanted to learn. And most of them want quick trainings that can be used. They can use their cell phone or their iPad, or a podcast. We have to now think, how are people getting their knowledge? And so having a really big content library was key. Now, we also have GCON specific content as well. What we brand the GCON way. It's our ethos. It's our company's vision. It's how we want to build a quality product. So it's very much both. But for us, we knew with the rapid growth we had to have a content library to support. And a big thing for us too is we wanted to create what's called a pull environment for training. Most of the times in an organization, you're pushing out training, right? You're like, take this, do that, do this, do that. We wanted to have a content library that was fun and easy to use, that people could go in and search for whatever they wanted. So we do have our specific training paths, but, in my case, for example, I've used the training to, brush up on my public speaking or figure out marketing and branding. I mean, that's not something that would be in my career path specifically, but it's very important to it. So we wanted to create an environment where people could go in and quickly pull trainings that they needed. But we also wanted to make it intuitive for supervisors as well. We wanted it to be something in coaching conversations that the supervisor could easily pull up the LMS. They figured out a pain point from their employee and say, okay, well, yeah, no, let's find a training for you right now, assign it to them and have record of that. So content library, I can't speak highly enough for that. But again, you do want to infuse your own company's training methods in that as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to a little bit of a share screen here real quick, but just to open up the Q&A, but I have a couple of questions too. So Hiro, just let me know and we'll switch back and forth. But a little advice, if you will. So things are going swimmingly. You've got momentum going, the buy-in's there, supervisors know how to start accessing the tools, et cetera. Are there any things that you would have done differently at this point? So just for all of us, the younger child syndrome, we can learn from the folks that are ahead of us. Any lookouts in terms of what you might have done differently so far?
Definitely. And I'll recap, I think a couple of things. I mean, definitely at the beginning, understand the lift that's required. Don't look at it in a vacuum, like we're going to launch this and it's going to be good. It needs to be aligned with your company's 5-year plan. You need to be able to directly tie in how your skills mapping, your career mapping will align with the organizational plan, because that is going to be constantly evaluated. It has to be intertwined or else you're not going to have a synchronization on that. And so that being the case, you really do need to do some deep dive sessions with your executive team to better understand and better convey how the skills pathing will align with it, and getting that buy-in from each individual. I'm a big fan of that. I know it takes extra time, but I found it to be tremendously valuable to just set up one-on-ones with all of the executives to really understand their needs and address them. So I think that's critical. And then understanding the communication strategy behind it. So once you've built out your outline, you really do need to get nitty gritty with how this is going to roll out, being that there's so many people involved, so many stakeholders, that it is going to be across your organization. You can't overlook anybody. And so we really did some great working sessions, like with the mid-level managers, with our entry-level employees, to really understand what their pain points are and how we could do the value prop to them as well. So, once your C-suite business case is approved, you're not done. you have to think about your end users, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not going to be a successful launch if you don't think about the people that actually want to use the software and the tools. So those would be the biggest lessons learned for us, is really thinking of it on a much bigger level and pitching it that way, but also having the data to back up your plan. Really think through, whatever's in your head. Don't assume that somebody else understands the value inherently. Map that out for them. Give details to that. And then the last thing I would say is have those metrics to hold yourself accountable and flesh it out with your C-suite team. Definitely you can't make those in a vacuum either, because the thing that I might think is important to evaluate could be just completely irrelevant to your C-suite team. So really make sure they're at the table to flesh that out. So those were some big learning points for us.
Those are fantastic. And here, I don't know if you had another one in the queue or not.
I do, yeah. So we've got a question from Michelle. Danielle, can you talk a bit more about the skill gap analysis and how you identified which skills to give to which user? Did that come from strategic objectives or by role? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from our skills gap analysis, it was kind of a two-pronged approach. So we looked at our career mapping for each role. So for example, we have a project engineer. Their next step is to be a project manager to senior project manager. So that is a job family. Let's call it that. So there are inherent skills to that job family that are outside of our company's strategy, right? So they just think they need to be very task oriented. They need to be communicative. They need to have persuasive skills with clients. And I'm just spitballing right now, but those are just the inherent skills to the role. And when we had to, again, align, like, what does the mid-level manager think versus what does the executive think, and then make sure we were all in agreement on those. So that was step one of just inherent skills to the role. And then step two was for the skills gap is, okay, analyzing what does the state of your workforce look like right now, and where do you want to be in 5 years? So for us, as an example, we really want to ramp up in different scopes of construction, doing more data center work, larger commercial projects. So we knew so we look at our workforce now, and we knew what skills we needed to meet that 5-year mark, what's missing. So for example, we will need to have a very deep bench of MEP professionals to meet that criteria in 5 years. How do we start developing the skills for those people now? So, and then it becomes a mixture, right? So then, all right, well, we can start training some of our field engineers in these skills needed for MEP, but also who's going to train them? That's a huge gap we have right now. So we need to go out to market and get an MEP professional, maybe multiple, to start training those individuals to meet where we want to be in 5 years. So that's that gap analysis of really understanding what skills are going to be needed in the future. It's that look ahead so that you're not caught blind when you want to go after a project, in our case, and we don't have the relevant skill sets on the bench to be able to fulfill those needs.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, Danielle, and let me know too, on you're going doing the gap analysis, and some of the things kind of pop, like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to go externally, and there's a cost for that. And then we have to upgrade our LMS. There's an upgrade for that. How does the budgeting process go as you're going along? Like, right, because I am assuming every year there might be, because of the good work in the gap analysis, it gives you some things that you don't have. How are you working through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, that funnels into the next question of what resources do we need to be able to bridge this gap? And you can get creative too at that point, because you can run the cost of being able to upskill and reskill. It may be dramatically less money to do that than to go to market and hire somebody. Yeah. And that's the advantage of being proactive about it, is that you're not going to get a project land in your lap and you need to fill an MEP supervisor role in 3 months, which, good luck with that. That's going to be a 6 month to a year endeavor. And so then what happens? You end up paying, an immense amount of money in recruiter fees, or you're paying large bonuses for that individual, which are warranted. But if we had taken a step back and said, okay, well, instead we can reskill and upskill and get to that level, you can start avoiding some of those costs. But there's going to be the inevitable where you're going to have to invest, right? And so you just kind of have to understand, and maybe that's where it's a good exercise in seeing what those gaps are. And if you do run the external cost of not doing anything versus what you can do now, that can also be a really good value prop case as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what I'm hearing you saying a little bit earlier too is when you do the career pathing and you're thinking about the skills that people need, there's, I'm assuming, really good moments where you realize that you had somebody in a role who's great as that individual contributor. They have the right skill. They've got the training they need. They have the right personality, right? There's a cultural piece, of course. Absolutely. And then as you look up a couple of layers, you can go, ooh, that could be, just because they're amazing here does not mean they're going to be an amazing boss or an amazing hero. And without some sort of kind of flashlight down that future hallway, you just promote, and then you're like, oh crap, that's not working. So I think there's a lot of other advantages to that kind of planning, where you can be like, all right, I'm going to really have to work on, I'll make up a name, hero, for the next couple of years. Just kidding. We're like, yeah, she's great and amazing here, but she's going to go out into the field and talk technical design with a bunch of folks. Boy, we're going to need to build that skill up. So yeah, offset that before you're just like, well, they're the best person, they'll quit if we don't, promote them. And then you're like, 6 months later, not so great.
And Jerry, you brought up something also that is such a great point too. It allows you to have those coaching conversations with employees proactively, because you could find that, maybe the person that you slated to be your MEP supervisor doesn't want anything to do with that. And right. you can't just assume that. You have to work with that person. And again, when we're coaching our employees, we have a duty to, help them get better what they want. Obviously, there's things that sometimes we all have to flex in different directions as needed. But at the end of the day, if they really don't want to do that thing that you had planned for them, that's not going to work out very well for you. So you're absolutely right. The value that it adds in terms of coaching conversations is incredible.
Yeah, I love it. I love where all the
question to that with those development conversations and identifying, hey, Jerry needs to upskill here to get to this next point in his career. Is that what's involved in that process? Is that a manual process? Is it HR? Is it the direct manager choosing what skills, or is there any kind of like tech that you guys have used to help expedite the process of like skill selection for that upskilling?
Yeah, so we did a combined approach. We did a market research of really just collecting data on what the market is saying roles need, but then we have to cross-check that with our internal organization too, because again, that those are our end users at the end of the day, and so we did a lot of case studies for that. So we did the group sessions where we asked PEs, and again, I'm using job families now, specific ones. PEs, what skills do you feel like you need in this role? Then we asked the mid-level managers, what skills do your PEs need? Then we asked the C-suite, what do they need? Kind of did that Venn diagram aspect. Okay, what are these key skills? What are the outliers? And then then this is where your subject matter experts really come into play, because you designate someone that you've determined within your organization that embodies all of these skills. And that's where they can really set the tone to be like, no, they absolutely need that. They don't need that. So you're relying on someone's expertise to validate the skills that you selected. And I mean, again, this is ongoing too. So we do. And so then what we do is we build that into the LMS and we create trainings around those skills. And when you have a very robust LMS, and that's why it's very important, if you want to do skill pathing, that you're having that conversation with your LMS provider. Are you able to create career pathways and channels within that LMS? Because then now we have created job families and trainings that are all lined out, and a new PE comes on board, we can automatically assign them that curriculum of training based on what we learned. So it is it's a mixed approach. So we have to identify what the skills are, and then we can leverage our tech stack to create trainings around the skills.
Yeah, it's a great example too of how that system, once you have it in place, it kind of feeds itself. So if you have a project engineer that is with a newer client and there's tech out there that they're not geared up for, or they're hearing, I'm going to need to know some scary version of AI. I won't go there, but they can report that back, say, hey, by the way, on this job and over the next couple of years, because a lot of your jobs are longer, we're going to need to know how to do this. They can kind of report that back, if you will, and have that kind of built into the next project engineer.
Big time. And one thing you're alluding to too, Jerry, is, our LMS, we're able to see what trainings our people are going in to select outside of their curriculum, so we can monitor that. And if we see that PEs are all like, wow, that's crazy. 70% of our PEs are wanting to get more training in email communication. We never assigned that training, but I think let's go ahead and do it. Let's make that part of their standard curriculum. And so again, leveraging AI, which sounds scary, but actually can be very beneficial to monitor and make your jobs easier, right? So again, we're trying to make our jobs easier with AI so we can be the strategy behind it. But you're exactly right. It's just keeping your finger on the pulse of what people want and what they're asking for.
Love it.
With those skill pathing and like the ability to also go in and, grab new lessons that you're interested in. Danielle, one of the studies that you referenced that we're going to send out to everyone on the call from SHRM recommended an 80-20 rule in terms of 80% of the time your employees should be doing their work on the job and 20% of the time spent on training. Are you following that 80-20 rule, or what have you found to be a good balance to both, get people doing their day job, but also providing that skill training and upskilling to meet your own goals?
Definitely. And yeah, we're doing that right now. It's a good rule of thumb. We are still gathering metrics on that. But that is a big piece where it has to be sustainable. I mean, this can't be something where it's overtaking your employees' lives, training. So 80-20, we do feel that's very sustainable. And again, we're really trying to focus on quick learning bits. That's really our focus right now, because we want someone to have a training and be able to immediately apply it and not feel like, well, I just went through that, but I don't even know where to begin. So a lot of our training is focused on the assessment tool as well. Is now that you have that training, how are you going to actually go and be able to use that information as well? So it's really, I mean, that's the one thing I think you're always going to kind of be trying to find your sweet spot with. But one thing that came up, which it kind of ties into the question here, is, we got some questions of, well, what if employees are just training all the time and that, leads to less in productivity? And it's like, well, no, we have to look at those things separately, because, if they're not getting their work done because they're training, that's a separate conversation. That's a supervisory thing where they need to be monitoring that and making sure they're still on task and productive. But one thing I loved about the LinkedIn learning report for 2023, people were, learning and development professionals were saying, we have found that people who are taking the most trainings, that are more invested in training, there are top players. There are A players, so we have to get rid of the stigma that these people are just going online, wasting time training. I mean, these are your top players that want to get better. And if they're able to manage their time effectively, where they can get their work done and still upskill, more power to them. So we just have to kind of retrain the stigma around that as well, I believe.
Yeah, I think that argument can be used. I think that argument can be used too for managers who say, well, I don't have time to attend this, training. And it's a little different since most of your trainings are bite-sized, like you've been saying. But yeah, for those managers to say, I'm spending way too much time, managing my people, or on my day job, I don't have time to do this training. It's the same argument of, this training is going to help you, increase your skills and be more productive and do your job more effectively overall, right?
Absolutely. And I think also one thing I'll add to that too, is that's where you really have to hold yourself accountable as that learning development professional and say, well, I'm going to make your job easier. I'm here to make training a breeze for you. You take that on personally and say, you let me know where your pain points are and I'll fix them, because we do not want it to be cumbersome. We don't want it to feel like a drag. And that's strategically getting better. That's when you look at training as an evolving thing and not just this standalone system you have, but you're constantly trying to find ways to get better and be more productive with it. And that's the challenge for learning and development professionals.
It's the eye twitch of everybody who's managing an LMS system is calling the individual or the manager going, hey, 3 more days, they have to take their training. I think part of what you're talking about too is brilliant, because you do have to kind of re-educate people on what training is. They're coming in from different organizations. They've been on an LMS. They've taken the sexual harassment training. They've taken this. They've been yelled at by their HR person. So it's like, this is a different definition of what training is. And it does go back to the, what's in there for the employee. Yep. Here's the, your ability to grow your skills and your capabilities, all that. But I think that'll take time to kind of say, it's not the training you're probably thinking of. They are both important, but right, one is doing something different for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is why we could talk for so long about training, because it's not a vacuum. I mean, training needs to then flow directly into performance management and career upskilling, right? So you're not saying, take these trainings, you're done. It's like, okay, you took these trainings. Now let's put you on a higher scope of work. Let's actually show you the merits of what your training got you. And I think that's where a lot of times training has fallen flat is, we go in, we take these trainings, but we're like, I'm still in the same role. I'm doing the same thing. I'm not being challenged. And that's where you have to bring in the coaching and development piece with it. And that's a training in itself for mid-level managers. So trust me, you will not be sitting twiddling your thumbs when you have a training initiative. You always have something to think about. So
that's great. And here I want to be mindful of the time, make sure we get questions answered, etc.
Yeah, we're about up on time. I don't have any more questions in the queue, but for anyone who's been dying and waiting with bated breath, go ahead and slap that question into the chat, and we will get things wrapped up here in just a moment.
And while they're clicking away, we'll sneak in one more, Danielle. So you did a wonderful job, and thank you for explaining kind of where it started, what the process is. What's the future here? What are the next steps in terms of skill building and dual career pathing, et cetera, that you're doing? What's coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have our 5-year plan for training and development. We had to start based on all of the challenges that I mentioned, and maybe actually the opportunities. We had to really line out what our bite-sized pieces are. And really it's putting those career paths in place, and now it's going to be an ongoing evolution of what that training looks like, depending on again what our strategic goals look like, But we also have to look at the economy as well. And that's one of the resources that, if you're able to share it with the audience, I mean, we look at what the World Economic Forum Future of Work 5 years looks like. We want to keep a finger on the pulse of what skills are going to be obsolete. And we want to make sure that, because what that means, it does not mean your employees will become obsolete. It means you need to pivot and reskill your employees that have those skills that AI or tech might take over, and put them in another role where they will be able to continue their career path. And so that's going to be a big piece for us too. Obviously looking at our organizational skills, but looking at macro skill sets needed for our workforce, and making sure that we're on the trend with that.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's all I have for you.
Excellent. So Danielle, your behavioral assessment, I'll just give it a real overview. You're freaking awesome. There, scientifically proved it. Yeah, no, but thank you for joining us and kind of sharing the experience with us and giving us some of the best tips, best practice, etc. And Hero, you're going to, I'll let you take it from here to wrap this up. But in terms of dropping in the links and some of the resources Danielle has given us.
Absolutely. So, we have a couple of resources that Danielle mentioned, including the LinkedIn 2023 Learning Report, World Economic Forum, and a couple of stats from SHRM that we'll be sending out to everyone who's on the call via email. You'll also get this recording as well. So that should hit your inbox by tomorrow morning once I finish processing it. And Jerry, if you want to tap that next slide.
I wasn't going to forget Hero Steel Trap. Yeah.
The opportunity to join us for our webinar next month, which will feature Jennifer Buxton, the CEO of newly created Forbes.jobs by Forbes. So we'll be sending that out as well. And that'll all be hitting your inbox tomorrow morning. That's everything we have for you all today. Again, thank you so much for joining, everyone. And thank you, Danielle. It was a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks, everybody.